in the bustling suburbs of Lagny-sur-Marne, France. A young Paul Pogba juggled dreams bigger than the concrete streets that raised him. From an early age, Pogba wasn't just another football-obsessed kid, he was a phenomenon in the making. At just 16, he caught the attention of Manchester United's scouting network and was brought into one of the most prestigious academies in world football. But even in England, the Pogba story refused to follow the script. Clashes over game time and development philosophies pushed him away from Manchester and into the arms of Juventus in 2012. What followed wasn't just a resurgence, it was an explosion. Pogba flourished in Turin, quickly becoming one of the most dynamic midfielders in the game. His technique, flair, and long-range rockets made him a fan favorite. In just a few years, he went from teenage exile to global superstar. By 2016, Pogba's value had skyrocketed. He returned to Manchester United for a world record €5 million, a move that symbolized both ambition and expectation. For many, this was the final piece of United's puzzle. For Pogba, it was a return home. But no one knew that this homecoming would spark the beginning of a long, complicated chapter in his career. At the same time, he was leading the French national team toward its greatest triumph in a generation. The 2018 FIFA World Cup, Pogba didn't just play, he commanded. His goal in the final against Croatia sealed his legacy, cementing his role not only as a star, but as a leader. That summer, he held the World Cup in one hand and the hope of an entire footballing nation in the other. But as the cameras flashed and parades cheered, cracks had already begun to show behind the scenes. This was Pogba at his peak also. The moment his descent quietly began, by 2019, Pogba was no longer just a midfielder, he was a symbol. But symbols carry weight, and Manchester United's dressing room had become a pressure cooker. Injuries plagued him, managers rotated in and out, and every interview or Instagram post became fuel for controversy. The British tabloids had a field day. To them, Pogba wasn't a footballer, he was a headline. Still, Pogba remained defiant. He insisted he loved the club, but the friction was undeniable. Fans questioned his commitment. Pundits criticized his body language. He became football's favorite scapegoat. But Pogba, always enigmatic, rarely gave the world more than a glimpse. Of his true feelings, injuries worsened, his role diminished. By 2021, it was clear Pogba's second Manchester stint was winding down. When his contract expired, he returned to Juventus with a familiar smile, but a very different narrative. This wasn't the prodigy returning to conquer Europe. This was a man seeking to rebuild. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done testing him, barely settling into his second Juventus chapter. Whispers began to circulate, rumors of doping. At first, most dismissed them. Pogba, no chance. But then came the confirmation. A failed drug test. The world stopped. The allegations. Elevated testosterone levels after a random test. Pogba immediately denied wrongdoing. His defense was that it came from a supplement he hadn't knowingly taken. Still, the investigation moved forward, and the weight of the accusation hung heavy. This wasn't just a suspension. It was a threat to his legacy, to his entire career. Someone who had once lifted the World Cup, being accused of cheating was unthinkable. But this wasn't a dream. It was his harsh new reality. The suspension was swift and unforgiving. Pogba received a 4-year ban, effectively a career-ending verdict for a player in his 30s. Juventus distanced themselves quietly. Media outlets spun narratives and fans were left in shock. Could this really be the end? For Pogba, it was more than just about football. This was about identity. It wasn't just a player, he was a symbol of flair, of joy, of unpredictability in an increasingly robotic sport. And now, he found himself erased from the pitch, his name dragged through mud. He didn't post, he didn't speak. The silence was deafening, but behind closed doors, Pogba was fighting. His legal team launched an appeal, started working with specialists to prove his innocence, citing contaminated supplements. Science was on his side, but the system was slow, and reputations are delicate. The damage was done. Even if the ban were lifted tomorrow, would anyone see him the same? Still, there was a flicker of hope. Former teammates voiced support. Opinion, initially harsh, began to soften. "He doesn't deserve this," one player tweeted. "This isn't the Pogba we know." In football, loyalty is rare but memory even rarer. Months turned into a year. Pogba's fitness journey became a whisper in training grounds. Clips of him working out surfaced online. He looked strong, sharp, but not free. Finally, in early 2024, a breakthrough. Pogba's appeal would be reviewed by an independent panel. For the first time since the ban, the fog seemed to lift. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a chance. And for someone who'd always played like the spotlight never scared him, this was the one thing that did, being forgotten. As the review date loomed, Pogba's silence broke. In a short video, he looked straight into the camera. No music, no filters. "I'm not finished," he said. "Not yet." The news of the appeal hearing reignited conversation. Commentators who once wrote him off now wondered aloud, what if he's telling the truth? What if the ban wasn't justice, but a mistake? Suddenly, Pogba was no longer a fallen star. He was a question mark. Story still being written. The panel convened in Geneva, far from the lights of Old Trafford or the noise of Turin. Lawyers spoke in technicalities, scientists testified with charts and blood data, and Pogba sat quietly in the back. No flashy suits, no entourage. Just hymns, smaller than the myth, but bigger than the moment. Days passed, then weeks. No word. Meanwhile, Juventus quietly removed him from promotional material. Sponsors stopped returning calls. In football, absence isn't neutral, it's stain, and the longer Pogba stayed off the field, the deeper the mark became. But in Paris, something stirred. Deschamps, his former national team manager, reportedly called him not for sympathy, but for clarity. "Do you still want to play?" he asked. Pogba didn't hesitate. Yes, for Pogba, returning wasn't about redemption. It was about proving that love for the game still lived inside him. Not the headlines, not the lifestyle, just football. So he trained harder. Not to stay in shape, but to prepare for a second chance. If it ever came, and then it did, the ruling was made public in June 2025. The panel reduced the ban to 2 years, backdated to the original test. Pogba would be eligible to return to professional football in the spring of 2026. Relief swept across his face during the brief press conference, but it wasn't triumph, it was restraint. This wasn't the kind of victory you celebrate. This was survival. Pogba knew what came next wouldn't be easy. Not every fan would welcome him back. Not every club would call. But for the first time in years, the path was clear, and he was ready to walk it. Spring 2026, the lights came back on, but not in Turin, not in Manchester. Instead, it was in Monaco. An expected place for a comeback, but maybe that's why. It made sense. The club offered Pogba a short-term deal, modest by his old standards, but perfect for what he needed, a fresh start. He stepped onto the pitch not with swagger, but with stillness. The crowd didn't roar. It hesitated, then applauded. Pogba didn't wave. He just looked up, nodded once, and took his position. The match was nothing historic, a routine league fixture. But the symbolism was immense. Every touch was a statement. Every pass, a reminder. Pogba had returned not as a savior, but as a survivor. The media reaction was mixed. Some praised his persistence. Others called it a shadow of the player he once was. But Pogba didn't respond. He didn't need to dot his teammates, many of them. Younger and raised on stories of Pogba now saw the man behind the myth. A leader, yes, but one forged in silence, not noise. As the season progressed, Pogba didn't chase headlines. He chased rhythm. He rediscovered joy in the small things, interceptions. 1-2s, the occasional assist. No more dab celebrations, just closed fists, deep breaths. One night, after a gritty draw against Lyon, a journalist asked him, "Do you still believe you belong at this level?" Pogba paused, then calmly, "I never left. They just stopped seeing me." He walked away from the mic. No theatrics, just truth. That was always the story, with Pogba flawed, flamboyant, and misunderstood. But when the world doubted him the most, he did the one thing no one expected. He stayed. And sometimes, staying is the bravest thing of all.